welcome to Nebraska Entertainment Monthly. I'm your host, Elijah Fitzpatrick, and I'm joined by our guest today, Debbie Griffith.
Hi.
Debbie. Would you like to introduce yourself, kind of like what you do, how long you've been in this business, kind of stuff like that for the people who don't know at home?
All right, sure. I'm Debbie Griffith. I'm primarily a writer, but I have a background in accounting. And so I have been doing either writing scripts or working in film production for 28 years.
Ah, gotcha. Well, that sounds pretty exciting. So usually you do a lot of work like in the office. Do you do a lot of work on set, or is it mainly just kind of like a lot of budgeting, stuff like that, getting out paychecks? What is, I guess, kind of the...
All that.
Stuff like that? Oh.
So it kind of runs the gamut. I have done payroll, and I do grant compliance and grant reporting for film productions. I've also done wardrobe. I've done production assistance. I've been an assistant camera. I've done some directing. So it just kind of depends on what the project is and what the opportunity is. So.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Do you have a part of it that you like the best, like maybe a specific like kind of role you like doing the best, or like just a favorite part of your job that keeps you kind of going and keeps you like excited, kind of going into the office or to the set?
I like being involved in a project from the beginning, and I like being able to contribute. So I like being involved in fundraising for movies, and I like being involved in the production of movies. I used to like being involved in being on set and being in wardrobe and stuff, but then I discovered how much of the organizing and stuff that needs to take place, and I think I prefer that over over having to do, standing in some corner until midnight.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of
although
that
that's important. So
physical labor.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
guess.
exactly.
Yeah, I would kind of have to agree on that. Is there a part of it that you say has changed a lot? Because you've been in this, you said, for over 20 years. Is there a part that's, when you started, is completely different now from how it is today, or just how it's done? Or
yeah, quite a bit.
Like
so the technology has definitely impacted it. So when I first began, my early starts were with payroll, and I remember having to do budgets for films. And back in the day, everything was on paper. So we didn't have electronic spreadsheets. We had great big computer paper, and it was the size of those wall calendars, and we filled everything out by hand. And then we had little strips for the line item budgets, and when they changed, and they do throughout, then we had to redo the whole budget, kind of like weaving a little mat together. The cameras have changed over time, and but one thing I've noticed, I think the most, is the ethics with filmmaking. So kind of following some of the Harvey Weinstein fallout that happened, what I've noticed over the past couple of years, when I sign a deal memo, there's now ethics training that goes with the production that I watch, and I also have an ethics statement that I have to fill out, and I'm glad to, but it basically kind of boils down to the production companies have adopted that if you see something, say something. Point of view, and one of the most recent projects I worked on was just a couple of weeks ago, and they had us go through all kinds of training to identify how to be considerate to people on set, and how to bring things up, and just basic manners and human decency. And I've really noticed that change of consideration over time, because when I started, there was a lot of yelling and short tempers and stuff, and that still happens. But there's so much more acceptance and almost a much more zen approach to filmmaking, and I love what's happened with that. Also, the representation in film has changed, and so it's a lot more diverse, and I think that just benefits everything. So I'm loving what's happening.
Yeah, it sounds like a very just welcome change, especially, I haven't been nearly as long as you, obviously, but from what I've seen, it does feel a lot more, I guess, welcoming and more just diverse. Obviously, it could be a lot better, but compared to like what I grew up on, watching behind the scenes and stuff I've heard like that. So that's pretty interesting. You were talking about recent projects. Are there any like recent projects that you've done that are like pretty interesting, or like done something you've never seen before, stuff like that?
A couple of things. One thing that I noticed was that we used to have film tax credits in Iowa. And then a couple of years ago, we got them in Nebraska. That impacted what got filmed here. So I originally started out working in movies, and then there weren't any movies to be had, so it switched over to a lot of like television shows and some reality TV shows that would shoot segments here. And now I'm seeing it switching back to movies, and so the funding availability has made a big difference. The other thing is kind of what's happening with social media. So two of the projects that I worked on were a surprise to me. One was a documentary about a grocery store in Malvern, Iowa, and it was being produced by Meta, so Facebook. And one of the things I noticed about it was that we shot that project on film, whereas we're all Facebook users and we typically do our Facebook Lives with our phone, which has made an impact because you can make a movie on your phone. But it's the first project I've ever worked on that shot on film. Everything else has been digital. Wow. And then more recently, I did a project for TikTok, and they also did a documentary. So they were funding the whole thing. They had some of the best cameras I've ever seen, so they were using Arri cameras. And they were documenting how influencers were using TikTok. And one of the influencers was a teen dad, so he's just 18 years old, has a 3-year-old daughter that he's parenting. And as a single parent, he reached out to a TikTok community for tips on like how do you get the baby to go to sleep. And so he built a following up from his TikTok, and now he's in real estate and using TikTok with a very conservative, very solid real estate company. So that's probably going to change how that company does business. And then the other segment that they did was on a nursing home, and the activities director was a young 20-something that had mile-a-minute teenage cheerleader energy, and she was doing TikTok videos of the people that she was working with, and she built up to 1.5 million followers. Wow. So we were kind of filming around that, and so I think as we see those kind of technological advances and those kinds of platforms and the growth of social media, we are going to continue to be surprised at how it then becomes mainstream.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. You said that there were differences in like how surprising like they use film on the Meta commercial, and they also use like just really impressive cameras on the TikTok commercial. Documentary. I'm
sure they're using it for commercial purposes.
They probably are as well. Is there anything you also caught like that were different about those ones? Because those ones are very like set in the moment, very modern. Talking about like TikTok and Meta, two things that are both still pretty fresh. Is there anything else that was kind of different about that process or how they went about it that was different from what you've been doing for the past 20-something years? Or is it pretty standard for what you've seen?
Well, they had an open checkbook, so that made a big difference. So they had the best equipment. They had a range of equipment. They also had very skilled people doing it and plenty of staff. So that was unusual because I'm used to more working with not enough staff. So we all wear 10 hats and we do what we need to do. The thing that I've noticed more about other projects is having to do a lot of instant problem solving and think on your feet. So stuff always breaks, stuff's always missing, something's not working, the lights aren't there, and we have to kind of gerrymander, to get it happening. And I've noticed how good people who've done it a time or two have become at it, and yet how people who it might be their first time on set have an idea and it works. So I think that what I still see a lot of is just the teamwork in putting together a project.
That's pretty cool. I do want to ask though, since you've been doing this for a while, what was it kind of like when you first started, or how did you get your foot into the door for this kind of position? Was it like a slow build up, or did you get in like similar to a spot you are almost immediately?
It was pretty miraculous, actually. So I started out with Daughters and Girl Scouts. And I noticed that the Girl Scouts were kind of having trouble recruiting Girl Scouts and also putting out information about events that they wanted to do and to get kids involved in it. And I made some suggestions that the Girl Scout office wasn't prepared for, but wound up embracing. And so they wound up shooting videos and then using kids. And then we took kids to television stations to teach them how television shows were put together, and then they put together a show. So, and then that kind of rolled into Girl Scouts using the kids in commercials to advertise. And then that rolled into making friends with some filmmakers. And I'd always been a writer, and so I, decided that, I kind of just wanted to get involved in filmmaking to help me be a better writer, because it's one thing to sit in a room and think of all this stuff, and then it's a whole different thing to have to create a project out of it. There was a movie being filmed in nearby where I was living, and I just sent my resume in, which was pretty sparse at the time, but I happened to mention that I can sew, so like under other skills, I listed everything under the kitchen sink. And I mentioned that I could sew. And so my first job was in wardrobe, and what I did was took van loads of bags of clothing from the Goodwill to the laundromat to wash them for extras to wear in scenes, and then repair them because they were missing buttons and they needed zippers and things like that. And so from that, then that led to the next job, and then that led to the next job. And so I went from wardrobe to commercials to helping with raising money for things, and then because I had a background in accounting. So when I went to school wanting to be a writer, but I listened to the advice of, you should have something to fall back on and get a real job. So I like accounting, and I became an accountant, and I worked for 20 plus years for an insurance company in accounting. And so doing payroll and everything was just kind of a natural stuff. And people always need that, so it was kind of a diverse set of skills.
Yeah. You say you have like all these different types of skills. You did like wardrobe and writing and even like directing. Is there any skill of yours that you wish you got to use more in your line of work, or one you never got to use, or do you feel like you got like a fair shot at all of them to be able to use them?
I think I got a fair shot, and I think that I just kind of tried to emphasize things I was getting interested in. So I got very interested in the behind the scene, how you put a movie together, the back end, you always fix it in post, what happens in post. That kind of thing. So I've really liked that. What I'm not very good at is a lot of the technical things. So I don't really do well with rigging lighting. I don't really do well with editing, and so I haven't really been interested in learning all that stuff. And I have the best respect for people that do that. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do want to ask though, are there any like projects that you've done, or at least one, if you could? I know there's a lot of projects that you might like that has been possibly your favorite, one that you have the best memories from, one that you just enjoyed working on the most, or one that just has a special place in your heart. Do you have anything like that? Or you can even list multiple if you want as well, because I know there's probably
there we
a few.
go. I think my favorite movie is Going for Two movie. I love the story about it. It's kind of a heartfelt story about two 10-year-old best friends. I came to work as a production assistant on the movie, but quickly that kind of morphed into working in payroll, and then that morphed into helping them file the grant reports and working in post-production and helping with the producers with distribution and stuff. And I've just eaten it for breakfast. I just love it. So
yeah. That's pretty cool. And I did get to work on that movie as well as a production assistant. I did think it was a pretty great time. I remember hearing stories about how rough sets were, and it was kind of scary at first, but a lot of people were pretty nice on there, and it was a very, I guess for the most part, a kind of chill and accepting set. Like you were talking about earlier, how sets are kind of getting like that. So I'm guessing, hopefully that's a reason why you like that as well, just kind of for that accepting energy. But also I do feel like it was just a good time, an interesting story, and kind of good for Nebraska, or specifically Omaha, to get a project like that.
I think so, and I think what I liked about it is the producers are highly ethical,
Yeah.
And they're kind of buck stops here kind of people, and honest and upright about things, and I think they treated people as fairly.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to ask though, also, you were talking about a lot of things you do like about your line of work. Is there anything in the past 20 so years that you wish would change, that hasn't maybe changed? You could see ways it can improve some aspect of how things are done, or do you feel like everything is kind of going as smoothly as it can? I know things you're talking about, it could be better and it's working its way up there, but is there anything that you feel like?
I think the big productions are still dominated by where the film tax credits are. So I would, love to work on some period pieces or more documentaries or more historical stories, and those tend to rely a lot on like Canadian financing, and then they're shot in places like LA or Chicago or now Atlanta, that have the big sound sets that are set up for it and they have experienced crews, whereas I think the Midwest is really the best place, the heart of America is really the best place to do that. So I think that we haven't bloomed yet, and I think that we're not thought of when it comes to filming, and I really would like to see that grow, and so I hope in a few years from now, you and I can have another conversation about all the wonderful blockbuster movies that were filmed here that we helped make that happen.
Yeah.
So I would love to see that.
I would love to see it too and be able to work on something like that. It does feel a lot better. I hope you agree that it's moving in that direction, especially with movies being shot here. We had Going for Two. I remember hearing like a movie like that hasn't been shot here for a while. Do you feel optimistic about the future of filmmaking in Nebraska?
I do.
Yeah.
And the reason I do is I think that people have been impressed by our work ethic and what kind of people we are. We're good souls. We're just good, decent people.
Yeah.
And stuff is very available here, and we don't have huge traffic jams. You can fly into the airport and be on set in half an hour, not 2 hours, because you're stuck in traffic. But I also am starting to see sound stages being built. So Iowa doesn't really have film tax credits right now either, but 2 new sound stages have opened in kind of central Iowa. One's up by Mason City, and then one is a little bit west of Des Moines. And I think we'll start to see things like that happening more in Omaha. And we're set up well for commercials and some shorter film projects. So it wouldn't really take that long for us to ramp up to bigger things. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the future, are there any other maybe things you'd like to try differently, or positions you'd like to take on future projects, or do you feel like comfortable kind of doing a lot of what you've been doing for a while, or is there anything you still want to, I guess, try out?
I want to get back to writing, so I would love to write some feature-length movies and get them into production, and because I've taken advantage of all of the opportunities to be involved in filming things, I haven't had that much time, but now I think it's a good time.
Yeah, well, I hope that goes well for you. Is there anything you're writing now that you can talk about, or things you've written somewhat recently that you'd like to kind of discuss?
Okay, well, I made a couple of commitments. So I'm working on a thriller, and it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
So it's a true crime story about a lady who discovers that her husband is a serial killer. And so my pinky swear,
Okay,
I'll say it out loud. So
Okay.
my commitment is that I want to have the script done and polished in time to enter it for the Omaha Film Festival next year.
Yeah.
And I also want to enter it in Austin.
Okay. Well, that was pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to read it. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. So you're very interested in writing. You're talking about thrillers. Do you have a specific genre or type of movie you like to write, or is there anything you maybe want to write, or I guess what's your kind of forte when it comes to?
It's probably thrillers, but I also really like family movies, not necessarily the Hallmark stuff.
Yeah.
Although I know people are very, very successful at that. So I like animation. I like, feel good kind of movies involving children and
Kinda like
stuff.
Going for
but,
Two.
but yeah, exactly. So I just like a movie that you can go to and have a you know, a great sense that was a wonderful movie, and you can take everybody from your 5-year-old to your grandma to go see it. But I also really like action movies and thriller movies, like things that Liam Neeson would be in, and you know, to me, there's just such a skill in bringing that story out without falling back on a whole bunch of cliches, you know, and I really want to explore that.
Yeah, well, I'd love to see it or read it. I think you definitely probably have some great ideas there. Do you have any like inspirations for your thriller script, or things like films, shows, stuff like that that you kind of pull inspiration from? Or is it just
I read constantly, and I wind up clipping out news articles of things that catch my interest, and so I have a whole file drawer full of little stories about stuff. One of them that they did make a movie out of that captured my interest was those kids that were rescued in the cave in Thailand. I can't remember where. I can't remember where it was, but it's like, that's a story that needs to be told, you know. So if I guess things like that kind of catch my interest. It's like, that's a story that needs to be told. So I have a whole fodder of stuff, and so sometimes it just kind of sparks. You know, sparks my imagination for what I want to work on, but there's no lack of stories to be told. So
yeah, I would have to agree there. Well, I guess, are there any projects that are coming up that you could possibly talk about, speaking of the future, that you're kind of excited about? I guess whatever role you're taking on when it comes to that stuff here that is potentially exciting that you could talk about. I know you might not be able to talk about them all, but is there anything interesting coming up on your plate?
There are. Yeah. So I got to work with National Geographic Wild, and they film a documentary in Hartington, Nebraska about a veterinary office, and so that's been renewed, and it airs on Disney. So I'm excited for that to continue. And then I'm excited about those two projects for TikTok being released. So.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. Well, Deb, we're about to reach the end of this episode. It was really great talking to you. And I guess best of luck on your scripts and also those projects. So yeah, thank you everybody. That's been Nebraska Entertainment Monthly, and we'll see you next time.